In the past 6 months, I made some 30 to 40 asset packs. And recently I made the slow poly survival game kit, which contains about 120 assets. The original idea behind this, and pretty much all of my assets, was that I was creating somewhat of a library of assets for myself when making games. So I think it's about time to test how good the asset packs are, if they're missing something, or maybe if they have too much, who knows. I present to you as my engine of choice. I'll be using Unity, since that's pretty much what I always used. At this point I had no clue what the game was going to be called. I knew it was obviously going to be a survival game, and the rest I'd have to figure out along the way. Therefore, the name is Surviving Unknown. And so the project was created. The first thing I always do is get the player working as much as I can without making the world. So the first script was created. Player controller. This was really simple, since I've done this part about 120 times before quitting and deleting a project. First I got the basic forward, backward, left and right movement going. I connected it all into a movement input scriptable object that I can just pass around any script that needs it. Added some smoothness to the movement so it's not so rough, which of course worked first try. I was on to jumping next, and before you can jump you gotta be able to fall, so gravity. Now that I had that, I added the jump, which I had to tweak some values, and it was working as intended in the end. Okay, movement is done. I also need the player to be able to look around. And if you haven't noticed, I'm going for a first-person game. Is there a reason for that? No, not really. I just prefer first-person games for some reason, and that was enough reasoning for me. I made a simple camera controller where I also took all the input and placed it into a separate scriptable object that I can just pass around wherever I need it. Of course, I added smoothing to that too, and that was it for the camera controller. Really, it's that simple. Next, I went back to the movement controller because I wanted to add some states to it. Currently, the player can just walk, and that's not complicated enough. I mean, boring, that's boring. Added the ability to run and also to crouch, which was so much more fun. While we're talking about boring, I also had some camera breathing type thing to make the player feel less static. It's very subtle, but still adds a lot of feel to the game, I think. I really like these small little things or details that make the player feel a bit less like a robot. So I also added the FOV increase when the player is running. I added a little landing routine when the player falls, which just moves the camera a bit down and back up. And also a little head movement when the player starts moving. And only then, because it kind of makes you feel sick if it's there the whole time the player is moving. You might think this is complicated, but you can use the Unity's built-in animation curves to quite literally visualize the movement of an object, in this case the camera, and then just use a routine to lerp along it using a while loop over a set time period. Finally, moving on from the camera and movement, I wanted to add the thing that will make this a survival game. I present to you the stats. This is also one of those things I made 96 times before quitting and deleting a project, so it was pretty quick and pretty much working immediately. I decided to add health, stamina, hunger, and thirst. I made some quick UI to test if the stats are working as intended, and as you can see, they are. But then I hated the UI, so I went looking around the internet to find the UI that looks cool, or that I liked, and in the end I went for a little circular action in the middle of my screen. Also, I wasn't really digging the whole colored look on the UI, so I just went with gray and white, which is fine since the icons show you what stat is which. That makes no sense, but okay. The stats work. With that knowledge, I made the hunger and thirst go down over time. They won't actually go down this fast. This is just for testing, of course. Oh, and then the fun part. Obviously, the stamina was there for a reason, and I wanted it to go down whenever the player was running. Since I'm not using any kind of event to trigger the running, it's more of a, hey, do I have input? Okay, then run. Setup. I was having a bit of a hard time figuring out when to use stamina and when to regen it, so I spent a good 2 hours just on this part of the story. It looked like I got it to work, but don't worry, it will break at some point in the video and I'll have to fix it again. With that said, it was time to get some graphics in here since I couldn't do much more without them. I present to you the first asset to be added to the project, the player arms. This comes from the low world base female character kit, which comes included with a third person and a first person model. The third person model is of course rigged with a humanoid skeleton, which makes it work with all the Mixamo Rococo, your parents' basement animations you can think of. The first person mesh is also rigged and animated with 22 animations for now. The base idle walk, run, jump and pickup animations you might see in any first person game. Also the holding something variations of those animations and 3 attack animations. Also with the magic variation of those animations, including 2 more attacks. And all that for $3.99, but cheap. And if you order right now, you get all of this and the same thing you will get if you ordered in 2 weeks. Basically, you get what's in the package, no matter when you order. Okay, enough promo, back to the video. I placed the arms behind the camera, add a new animator which just has the idle walk and run animations for now. I just use a blend tree to have everything controlled by a single float parameter, and then change it based on the speed of the player, which I already had in the controller. Also, quick tip, you can add some smoothing to the animations by using a damp time parameter in the animator.setFloat. To move on to the next big thing, which is the inventory / equipment / equipping the items, blah 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 blah. So finally, not so long after adding the first asset, I am now adding over 100 of them. I present to you the Low World Survival Game Kit. Containing 20 modular wooden, plank and stone building parts, that's 36 if you don't know math. That's my phone also. 25 food meshes, everything from apples to canned tuna. That's quite literally everything. 8 furniture models, 5 medicine models, 24 prop models, branches, stones, bricks, rope, and so on. 12 melee weapons, 5 ranged weapons, and 4 ammunition models. It's almost everything you need to populate your survival game with content. And all that for only $40.99 or $7.50 at the point of making this video on CG Trader. 50% off for no fucking reason. Back to the video. I made some pickup objects and also made some interaction logic. For now it was only to destroy the interactable when the player interacts with it or raycasts to it, since, well, I don't have an inventory system yet. Also the system included 2 ways of picking up items, the so-called point click and that's it, and also the point click hold until you're bald thing. I did this since I wanted to use the hold system for things like chests and such at some point in the future. With that done, I was onto the most disgusting, head-hurting, heart-aching, leg-breaking, eye-popping thing in any game, the inventory. I'm just kidding. I did this part many times before, so I knew what to expect. I made some quick UI for testing purposes using a placeholder image of a chicken leg. That's all I had at that point, okay? Create the base inventory or the inventory slot, inventory item class logic, which allowed me to pretty much just pick up and swap items inside the inventory. And then I realized I forgot to add the pickup animation when interacting. So I did that and I had this. At this point, my brain was melting through my ears, so I went to sleep. Next day, I was stuck looking at the fucking chicken leg and man, I hated it. And I realized that the survival pack is missing the icons, which is something you will definitely need when making a survival game. So I spent about 2 hours just going through each object and making an icon for it, which was actually quite relaxing after making so much stuff the day before. I imported that into Unity and made the actual items that can be interacted with in the game, and then the scriptable objects that kind of, define what each item is. For now, I just made the consumable and weapon items. The rest I will add once I know that this part of the system is working. As you can see, the interactions and the inventory work just fine. For now. That's a bit of foreshadowing. I didn't really see what you were picking up at this point, apart from the icons, so I made a little hover UI element that will display the item's information, which it gets from the item. a bit too much, so I changed it to something a bit more normal so it doesn't hurt the player's eyes so much. In order to test what the item can do, I needed a way of using them, and I still didn't have a hotbar system in place, so I just went with the right click in inventory kind of thing, and it worked quite well. And as you can see, I can also define what will be shown in the right click element depending on the type of the item. So the weapon gets the equip button as well, but in the future I will just remove it because kind of equipping and using a weapon, it's the same fucking thing. And I just called the right click item use method, which every item has, and it worked. Didn't have any logic yet, so that was the next step. The logic was quite simple, at least for the consumable item. I just made the player stats into their own scriptable object so that I can pass it wherever I need, whenever I want. And then just every consumable item can define its own amount of health, stamina, hunger, and thirst. It restores, and bam! Works. Now that was simple, but to test the weapon items I needed some animations. I had animations that were included in the player models package, but I realized I overlooked something when making the package. The problem was that I wanted the left click to be an attack action. That was fine if I had a weapon equipped, but if nothing was equipped, the left click would just do nothing, be, you know, unresponsive, and it felt a bit restraining to the player. So I made a couple of new animations for the unarmed part of the story, basically just punching into thin air. Same as the item icons, these will be updated into their respective asset packs by the time this video comes out. With that done, I can move on to the weapon part of the animations. So I made a different substate machine in the animator that will be controlled by the state index, which I will obviously change depending on which item I have equipped. 0 is, you know, unarmed, 1 is holding an item, 2 in the future could be, you know, pistol animations, 3 could be shotgun animations, and so on and so on. Once I set it up, I just tested out that they worked. There was still no weapon being spawned, but the animation part was good. Tested that next by using the weapon item. It will get spawned in the player's arms. Maybe not with the correct scale and rotation, but if you put that aside, this looks kind of cool. In order to fix that, I just made each weapon item have its own holdable prefab, which is already rotated and scaled properly, and now it works. Started making the hotbar system, which was a pain in the ass, to put it mildly. It worked just fine when I was equipping the weapon. The problem was the inventory was using inventory slots, and the hotbar was using hotbar slots, which didn't really have the same functionality or weren't of the same type. Some of it was the same, and I just needed to figure out how exactly, you know, to define each slot, which would be absolutely fine if it wasn't 11 PM already. So I decided to just fix some things I didn't get to fix during the day. For example, the player can't look around or move anymore while he or she is in the inventory. And then I just went to sleep since my mind wasn't minding anymore. First thing that day, I just added the rest of the weapons, holdable prefab, since yesterday I only had the machete set up, but now all of them worked. Don't mind this error, I'm sure it's nothing important. Oh boy, I'm sure that worked yesterday.
A few moments later.
No, it's fine, I fixed it.
12 seconds later.
No, that's not good.
Day 4.
I woke up and I looked at my code and found a method called unuse. Is it just me or does that sound like a made up word? The slot is not updating. Interesting. At this point it seemed like nothing was working, and it was all because of this equipment manager script that was kind of doing a lot of different things and not only managing the equipment. So I deleted it and made a new script called the equipment controller. Completely different script. Okay, now it's working. It works.
Yay!
Sometimes you just gotta delete something and do a second iteration. This time around I already knew a bit more about it, or what I wanted, so it was much smoother sailing this time around. I also started implementing a action management system. Things such as interacting, picking up items, attacking and so on, were all actions, and I wanted a way to manage them. For example, I didn't want the player to be able to attack while picking up an item. or pick up an item while switching weapons, and vice versa. So this was really helpful in pretty much fixing all of the bugs I had at that point, since now all those actions were hooked up to the same manager and they couldn't get, you know, fired or called on while other action was getting called on. That makes sense, right? Okay, we're moving on. I also included a little UI element which shows if you can use an action. For example, when you're switching weapons, you're not able to pick up an item. That's my fucking phone again, shut up. So I want to visualize that and give the feedback to the player so that he or she knows, you know, something is happening. I have to wait until that finishes, until I can do more kind of thing. And it feels much more responsive because of just this one element. Kind of makes it seem like, you know, this all of this is planned. It's definitely not just buggy. Filled with happiness from my accomplishments, I added the medicine items to the game. They work just fine. I also added the prop items, which I intended to use for crafting. Inside the game, I called them utility items, since the player won't be able to equip or use them in any kind of way, other than crafting or, you know, destroying the item. And now the crafting. Another important thing every survival game has to have. Being a genius that I am, I just went full simple with the crafting. Started by making some UI for crafting. Super simple. Made a recipe scriptable object which just contains a list of ingredients, which are just items with their quantity, and a product. Super simple. That was day 4. To sleep now. Made some more recipes and plugged them into the crafting system, and it worked. Pretty much none of this is procedural, and I was just placing recipes into their slots, and that's it. That's why it's working immediately. I'm not actually a genius or anything. I'm not going to have like hundreds of recipes, so I'm completely fine with just manually plugging in some of them. Next, I made it so if the player doesn't have the required ingredients, the recipes are blacked out. Basically, I just made the logic for crafting. If I have this item, then I can do this. If I don't, then I can do this. You get it. Finally, I added a craft button, tested it, and it worked. The next course of action was, of course, to make all the recipes I will need, or that I know I will need at this point. And also add another update to the low world survival game kit. At this point, I just used a cube as a crafting station. Of course, that can't fly on my watch. I went ahead and made 3 new models, 1 crafting station for each tier, wood, plank, and stone. Let me elaborate. So up until this point, I just wanted to have 1 crafting station that would be able to craft all the things. But the wood tier crafting bench can now craft, for example, a wooden spear, and the stone tier crafting bench can craft a stone spear. Just an example. Makes sense, right? I automatically get some sense of progression right there because I have, 3 different tiers. Now the only way the player can get a crafting bench is to craft it in a crafting bench. So the idea is to have a couple of each crafting bench scattered around the world. The lower tier would be in the easier part of the map, and the higher tier would be in the harder part of the map. So now the player is encouraged to explore the world and look for them, and also maybe the stone bench is located behind a bear. That would be much easier to kill with a gun. Now the player is encouraged to explore some more and find a gun or ammo, for example, or a medkit that would help them kill the bear. Does that make sense? It does in my head. And once the player reaches the stone bench, for example, they can craft their own and place it in their base, which now gives them access to much better equipment, much closer to their base. Okay, I thought I was smart and doing something when I made that decision. Shh. The new models were now imported into Unity, and I just made different UI elements for each crafting station, and then enabled and disabled them accordingly, and had a pretty good system going. At this point, it was already getting late, so I just started playing around with what I could do for the building system. Got the object to follow the player camera movement at first, then just snapped to the grid, which Unity has its own grid component, which has a method called, I think, world to cell, and it just converts the world position to a cell to the closest cell. It's kind of amazing, actually. And then I got a very simple kind of connection point based snapping. Basically, the platform prefab has predefined connection points, and then I just get them and then snap to the closest one. It looks like I did a lot here, but don't worry, it won't work tomorrow. First thing I tried this day was to get a little shader magic going on. But then I realized shaders are magic and not even the god or the devil know how they work, so I just went with the simplest option. I got the objects to place in the world using connection points, and my logic was to have only the platforms placed on the grid and then have everything else be built upon the platform, which was a good idea. But I also went with the route that the platforms are placed using just the left click input, and the rest is placed on the platform interactable using the point click hold until you're bold method, which would indeed be my demise at the future point. Also, the building system is not that complicated. Only trouble I ran in was just handling that much information at the same time. For example, you have to check if the building part is close enough to the player so the player can't build on the other side of the world or below them. Also, you have to check if the object is intersecting with another object, and then if there's a connection point included, you have to, check if that connection point is already used by a different object. Just a lot of different conditions that go with a lot of different outcomes. Also, when editing this video, I went into my day 7 folder and found literally 0 videos, and then I remembered I spent the whole day tweaking the building system. This is what it looks like now. I didn't get it finished yet, but I'm close. I fixed all the bugs that were happening. I guess you'll just have to come next week and see if I got it finished then. But seriously, it's been a week and I didn't want to wait another day before making this video, since I know I would find something else to just finish before I made the video, and then I would, maybe I just make this and then I'll finish the video and then I'll make this. Well, but it's just a small thing. You get the point. But it's been week 1 and I got a lot of things done. Definitely much more than I expected. And hopefully this next week I can finish everything player-wise and start building the world, since that seems like the most fun part. Also, special offer: if this video gets 500 likes, I'll also make a free version of the survival game kit, which will be available to anyone. It won't include as many assets, but it will definitely have a lot. And you can find the links to the aspects in the description if you'd like to grab them for yourself. That's it for this video. This video is way too long anyways. Find out more in the next episode of Game Dev Ball XYZ.